Let me show you some women's pants and what can and cannot be let out. And I have a little trick of my own to give us a little inch or so. So here's a pair of pants. This is the back inseam. You could let that out, well, maybe 1/4 of an inch, maybe, because you need to leave a seam allowance. So that's a little iffy. But look at, this is our waistband. We don't have anything to let that out on. So it gets a little tricky, which means you have to use some of this fabric up here. The other thing we have here are, this is what they use in ready-to-wear a lot, and you need to be able to remove that. You just do it with the pliers. But I usually just leave it. I would say on this one, no. How about this pair? We've got a fly area. Seam allowance, definitely no. Looks like we have top stitching along that, and there's really nothing to let out. But keep in mind this area. Here we have, a good inch. And what about this pair of pants? Nice pair of silk pants. Well, seam allowance you could let out about 1/2 inch. The one issue here is, see this little top stitching, itty bitty. You'd have to rip all of that out first, because what that is, it's top stitched on the one seam to hold it open. You don't see it from the outside, but you see it on that seam. Just a little forewarning, it's a real big pain in the tush, but if you really like the pants, maybe it's worth it. So what do we have here? An inch. Here's another pair. Seam allowance, yeah, you could give yourself 1/2 inch. And the fly, we've got a good 1.5 inches, 1 3/4. That's pretty good. And this last pair, we don't really have much on the seam allowance. That's a pretty small seam allowance. And there's no darts. So why am I referring to all of this? Because I'm going to show you a little trick where if you measure this fly area, we could actually take this fabric on the waistband and move it over and fill something else in right here, as long as we can still line up the buttonholes. Now this one, it's a little bit more challenging because we have this buttonhole. So if that was moved over, we might be able to see that. But actually this would cover it up, so it would be okay. But there aren't any darts to let out. The one thing is if we're going to take off this waistband and move this over, which would give us another inch, we have to be able to let out an inch somewhere. So this pair so far would be my first pick. We have 2 front darts. Look at how much we can add to this. Almost 2 inches by moving this over to here. The one thing though is we have this buttonhole. So we really could only move it over that far, but it'll still give you an inch. So that'd be my first pick right now. We have 2 darts that we could let out. This pair, we've got 4 darts we could let out. This also has a buttonhole right here, which just imagine we're taking the waistband off and moving it over. If we move this over and add another fabric just to fill that in, you wouldn't be able to see it. And actually, we could cover up this buttonhole too because we have this here. Not bad. This goes to my first pick now. And this pair, it's not really worth it. There's nothing you can let out. So you could take the waistband off and move this over, but there's no fabric down here to let out. Hope I'm not confusing you. You'll catch on in a minute. And this pair is definitely a no. So let's get rid of those and let's get rid of these. This one is my first pick. What I'm going to do is remove the waistband from here, the tip, all the way around to here. It takes a few minutes to do that, but all you have to do is come inside here, find a good place to start. Be very careful not to rip your waistband. I'm just kind of pulling this away and opening this. Okay, so I removed this entire waistband. I'm just trying to give us a little bit of extra room for a pair of pants that you just can't resist keeping. We have 2 darts that we can let out. We also have a back seam with all the top stitching, and we also have 2 side seams. You can let out enough because when we reattach this waistband, This is going to be here. Now I have a feeling you're getting the visual for what I was talking about. This is going to move over. And when the pants are closed, this will cover up this buttonhole because we can move that button right here. The only person that's going to see that is you. So what's going to go in here? Well, just pick another piece of fabric, something that matches. Nobody's going to see that except for you. This is a lot of work, but if it's a pair of pants that you like, it's worth it. So when this is closed, this button, I'm just going to take it off right now. One thing you need to check though, before you even remove this waistband, is that ready-to-wear, sometimes they'll punch holes. They'll punch holes where the end of a dart is, or they'll punch holes where they want a button to go. So if there's a button on here, you need to remove it first, which I didn't do, but I already knew it was okay. Make sure there's not a hole here, because when we sew this back on, this is going to show. So this is just threads that need to be ripped out. So this is the overall concept. I'm going to let out 2 darts. The amount of room that I'm going to get out of this is about 1 inch, maybe 1 1/4 inches, just depends. So open one of the darts. How much room can we get here? Looks like we've got this belt loop is attached to the pocket, so you need to remove that. Hopefully by the end of this class you will not be afraid of ripping apart your clothes because it can all go back together. I did want to mention, one really easy way to give a little extra room would be to lower that waistband. The lower you get, you're getting into the hip area where there's more fabric. So here we go. Look at how much more room we could get if we really wanted. Whoa, that's a lot. Now is it going to change the cut of the pant? Actually, no. This just looks like a straight front. Now we can't add this much because we don't have that much to add to the waistband. So all we can add, determine how much you're going to add here. Let's just say 1 inch to make it easy. That's how much we're going to add. So that means we can add 1/2 inch to this side and 1/2 inch to this side. Just make sure whatever you do on the right, you do on the left. So this was the original marking right here. And we want to give ourselves 1/2 inch. This was the original. I'm going to put 2 pins there to make it easy for you to follow. That was the original. So I can move this over just far enough to give myself 1/2 inch on this side, which is right there. So all I need to do is repress that, and I just have a dart in a different placement. The other thing I could do is leave that dart and move the other, whichever one you want. It really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to use this right now because it's easier. Maybe pin it on yourself and see which one you like the best. So that's my new marking for this side, and I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. After I do that to the other side, you don't need to watch that twice. This is what you're going to do. You're going to take the waistband, give yourself a little bit of room so you can get your sewing machine in here. This waistband actually, it looks like this just slides right in and it was top stitched. Quite often it's going to be like the gray pants I've shown you where that was in a different lesson, but you can stitch right through here first and then flip it over and reattach. So however your waistband goes, just do the same thing. I'm just going to slide this back in place. I'm giving myself a lot of extra room here. Don't worry, I'm going to take those pins out. So do this all the way around your pants. Take out both darts. If you don't have darts, take out your side seams. However much you do on the right, do on the left. And reattach your waistband until you get to here. And I'll meet you back in a minute. Okay, I've reattached my waistband with the pins. Not sewing, just pins. And this is what I have. If I close this, and put a button right here at the edge of this buttonhole. This will cover it up and nobody will ever see what's here. Very easy, we just let out both darts, or again, like I mentioned, you can let out side seams, whatever you want. So here I have just a piece of muslin fabric. That's all I'm using here. And interfacing, fusible interfacing. I've already fused it to here and made a nice crease. And this is what I'm going to fit. Notice that on this piece right here, I didn't bother pulling that out. It's already folded so perfectly. All I'm going to have to do is top stitch. So this actually is going to squeeze right into here, but not quite yet. First, I want to figure out where the placement, if this is going to be the top and that's going to slide in there, I need to stitch a finished edge like this. So I'm going to stitch there and cut here. And then I also need a seam allowance, since the stitch line is going to be here to keep up with this stitch line. Here's the stitch line, and that will be my cut line. So go to the sewing machine with your little flap, flip this right side out. Actually, I'll do it this way. So since I'm right-handed, I'm going to right sides together, flip it backwards, and then stitch right along that line that you just made. Right there, stitch. Stitch that seam, trim it, flip it right side out, just like this. Give it a pressing. You'd probably be pressing on an ironing board. I'm just using a hand because it's right here. I'm not using it for any particular reason. All right, we're getting closer. So this is going to fit right into here, like that. Okay, now the one thing we still need to do is to press up our seam allowance at the bottom, which I'll do right here. I'm just going to fold this up along that purple line I gave you and fold under the other side. You're basically encasing the extra part of the fly so you don't have extra fabric sitting there. Extra fabric meaning this raw edge. I'm going to take this and encase it around this fly. Put that in there. Covering up the zipper. Go right here. I'm going to pin that and then take this part, and we already had that pinned on, just reattach it. Squeeze. This is a little tricky, but just squeeze that extra fabric in there, just like this. Now this is just a wee bit crude, but look at this. All I have to do is top stitch along that line to reattach my waistband. We've just given ourselves 1 1/4 inches to the waist for the pants that you love, you can't live without. And some of our pants are very expensive, we want to keep. When this is closed, I will reattach the button right there on this buttonhole. This one we'll just remove, we don't need this. And so this will look just like this. Reattach the button, the belt loops, and you're all good to go. So it's a little time consuming. When you sew your waistband back on, the one thing you need to do is sew this first, right here, going through all these layers, and then just sew along your waistband.